The Cougars face a familiar foe in a lot of ways, or at least in terms of the mascot this Thursday. What do we need to know about the other Cougs?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, today the podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. I'm joined by Erik Hall of the Telegraph in Alton, Illinois, who has covered college sports for a long time and covers the SIUE, make sure you throw the E in there, Cougars. I got to ask you about Edwardsville. I usually open every show with an odd question about something to kind of get the folks engaged. If you could tell people in the comments down below, what do you think of Edwardsville as being known for?
I would say, honestly, its proximity to St. Louis is what most people associate Edwardsville with, that it's near St. Louis. So, and thanks for having me on to talk about this matchup, Parker. It's really exciting to see SIUE make its first NCAA tournament and get this kind of matchup and opportunity against Houston.
SIUE making the tournament for the first time as Division I school. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. We've got more on that fun later, but I got to ask you, so you won the conference tournament. This was not necessarily a surprise after that, after the confetti fell at that moment, but what was it like following this program and then all the kids, the coaching staff, everyone realizing like, oh my gosh, we just made the big dance?
Yeah, it's been exciting to see the success of SIUE. My sister went to SIUE and she ran track there. Went to high school with a guy that was on one of its first Division I teams. And to see from what SIUE was 20 years ago as a Division II program to now getting to play in the big dance, it's really been exciting to see that progress for the program. And you could see how thrilled it caught the attention of the Washington Post. Chuck Culpepper did a really nice story on Rayshawn Taylor and the hug he had with his mom after that win. And I think that exemplifies the impact and the excitement for the program to be reaching this stage.
You mentioned knowing people from back when this program first got to the Division I level. It's kind of been a slow burn here for the program to go further back than that, kind of hitting success bench points at every level. When you make this jump, though, back in I think my notes here say 08. I don't know if that's it. I guess that means they're probably tournament eligible a few years later.
Yeah.
Did you know that this was a possibility? What you joined the Ohio Valley Conference, so it's kind of like one bid league in a lot of ways, but coming out of Division II basketball before this, did you see this happening at some point down the line, or was it really about other sports?
I grew up in Charleston, Illinois, so I've been following the OVC for a while and saw Eastern Illinois getting a berth to the NCAA tournament out of the OVC. So it's EIU did that pretty early in its stint in the OVC, so it seemed like something possible for SIUE to do it. That it took this long is a little surprising, but it's also surprising that EIU hasn't been back to the big dance in 25 years. So, but when you got guys like Janai Broom playing in the OVC, they make it hard to get out of there every so often as well.
Well, so talk about that. The Ohio Valley Conference is a league, right? It's not immune to making noise in the NCAA tournament. It has the heartwarming stories, like you mentioned, where people are talking about these kids making the tournament the first time, but it's also it's got programs in it that have strong basketball backgrounds. Where does SIUE fit into that? Obviously, they won the league this year, but where does it fit into that in a more common occurrence?
Yeah, a lot of teams have been in the OVC and moved up. Jacksonville State was in the OVC at one stretch, and now they're in Conference USA, I believe. And I think they ended up in the NIT. But they were, I think, in the championship game of their conference tournament. Troy has been in the OVC and is, I believe, and now in the OVC or in the NCAA tournament this year with matchup with Kentucky in the first round. So Correct. Programs come through the OVC and go on and go to places they can make more money, but also plenty of places have stayed and found success there.
Well, and this year at the end of the regular season, the team that was kind of the top of the conference was Southeast Missouri State. And frankly, there was kind of it was South Missouri State, and then a couple games, then City, Illinois, Edwardsville, and then a couple games, and then Little Rock. And there was kind of a little spread there at the top. Was it a competitive league that the records don't quite dictate, or was it really kind of an out of nowhere thing for SIUE to even win the conference tournament?
SIUE was near the top of the standings most of the OVC season, and they were tied with a couple weeks to go for first. But then they had a rough week and kind of realized they weren't going to win it anymore. But SEMO had not been a good matchup for SIUE entering that OVC championship game, and SEMO won both matchups by almost 20 points. So it didn't seem like a good matchup going in, but SIUE sure flipped the tables in that title game, and they were in control that whole way. Tennessee State in the semifinal gave them more of a push than they got from SEMO in that championship game, because that championship game was over about halfway through the second half.
So what flipped there? Was it just they played better, or was it something more complex than that?
I'd just say they played better. That's what it seemed like to me. So I'm sure Brian Barone could break down all that went different for him, but I just think they played a lot better.
I want to ask you one more question about the year before we get into this matchup, and frankly, some of the names to keep an eye out for on this SIUE roster. But you matched up early in the year with a couple of Power 4 teams in Indiana and Illinois. I'm not trying to pour salt in a wound or anything, but those were fairly decisive wins for the Power 4 programs. In your following of the OVC, this conference, this region, do games like that early in the year ever help a team as they get ready for this tournament, where they almost always are the 15, 16, maybe a 14, getting ready for a traditional power like that?
The Indiana game was actually close for a half or so, and then Indiana blew them out the second half. The Illinois game was never close. But yeah, those are good. But then they also played Indiana State and won. So
right.
Playing up, you never know when you might pull off an upset like Evansville did with Kentucky a few years ago, or so teams pull off those upsets once in a while, and those games might be why SIUE is not in a playing game as well, to help their net ranking and get them out of the playing game. So I think those are very important games for a program like SIUE to have on their schedule for competition wise, but also for net ranking, but also it's some money to help fund the other programs.
Well, and you tapped on something I actually want to ask you about before we get to the players, because I do want to get to players in a second, but you mentioned the idea of being in a playing game, and I, as someone who's over on this side, get a little, a torn, I would say. Would you rather be in the play-in game and get a chance to get a victory under your belt against a similarly sized, similar resume team, or do you want to be out of a play-in game so you're officially in the dance? Does it matter to a team like SIUE?
As someone watching, I enjoy seeing them actually in the 64 team field. It's the gamble of if you win, then yes, there is benefit of being in the playing game. But if you lose, I'm not sure there was. I can talk about how I feel about it, and I wish they'd go back to a 64 team tournament. But they were sure excited to see their name called on Selection Sunday. So I think that's the excitement, and they would have been happy to be playing anywhere this week.
And that's a moment that's pretty hard to replace. I want to talk about the players that went through that moment and some of the names to keep an eye on in a second. Before we get too far into this, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Upwork. If you're scaling your business, scaling requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and much more. Experts are ready to help you to take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Right now, you can find right talent. If you need help with marketing campaigns, they can help you connect with freelance experts who deliver incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now and push it up for free at Upwork, UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with the top talent and grow your business today. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Fabric. Now, life can move really fast, especially when you have a family, and one day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can even get covered in 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting health questions. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs, joined by Erik Hall of the Telegraph in Alton, Illinois, talking to us about the SIUE Cougars. Now, we mentioned his name briefly, but this Rayshawn kid is really talented. He is Player of the Year in the OVC. He's a 6'1" guard, averaging 19 points per game. What is he best at, Erik?
Scoring.
Fair.
Yeah, he can do it all as far as scoring. I would say he's a good 3-point shooter. Shot 34% this year on 3-pointers. He's pretty good at getting to the line. Shot 188 free throws this season. So shot 41% from the field overall. So at the OVC level, he's a really, really good scorer.
And we say at the OVC level, obviously that's the level he's played at the most. When you remember, those Illinois, Indiana, even Indiana State, like you mentioned, which isn't a Power 4 program, but is a good sized program. Does he kind of raise his level of play in those kind of moments, or SEMO even a competitive a game with a lot on the line, or is it just kind of he plays that way all the time and that's just who he is?
He's definitely a consistent scorer for the Cougars, for the SIUE Cougars. Someone like him, you know you're going to get production from him. I think he played at a really high level when they played Illinois and Indiana. He probably could have helped Indiana this season because he's in the tournament and they're not.
And they're not.
He's just a consistent scorer. I don't know what he'll do against Houston on Thursday, but he's going to get some points.
Well, and, it's not the first point guard Houston's played this season. They hadn't played many that scored 19 per game. And so I think that does offer an interesting matchup. At 6'1", he's small but not tiny, as you'll sometimes see. Like some schools in the 16 seed line will have like a 5'9" point guard and so he's not like little like that, but he's not a 6'4", 6'5" kind of guy. Do you think there's a chance he's playing in Europe or Canada or something like that? He's a senior, so he's not going to transfer up a division or anything like that. But is he going to be playing again after this, or what's the thought with Rayshawn Taylor?
I think someone would be smart to give him that opportunity. We'll see what actually pans out for him. But if he wants to play in Europe, I think he can play in Europe.
Well, this could very well be a tryout then, so I guess maybe I'm jinxing myself here with that one. Other guy, big guy, Ring Malith, 6'9" on one side, 6'10" on another. Big kid from South Sudan, did his high school time in Florida. he's averaging 11.5 and just over 11.5 points, just over 7 rebounds per game. He's got a bunch of double-doubles on his resume across the season. When you watch this guy play, again, 6'9", 6'10", long, what sticks out to you about Ring Malith as a big guy? Because that can be a game changer, get a couple extra possessions out of a guy like that.
Yeah, he's a good rebounder, good at blocking shots, get his points mostly near the basket. He only attempted I was looking at the wrong line. He attempted 131 3-pointers this year. So he shoots from outside a good amount too. So, he does. I think defense and rebounding will be mostly where you see him contributing against Houston, but he'll put up some points as well.
Is there another guy I mentioned, because statistically, if you're reading a box score, Ring Malith and Rayshawn Taylor jump off the page. Is there another name that you feel like you're going to hear a lot on Thursday on the SIUE Cougars side of things? Is it maybe an X factor or an alternative scorer or a guy that's really stepped up in the last month?
Brian Taylor's consistent. He's a cousin of Rayshawn Taylor, so that's someone to keep an eye on. Another one that's a little further down might see on a box score, but seems to have an impact is Miles Thompson, a forward for him that comes off the bench. So those are a couple guys I'd throw in there to keep an eye on.
Miles Thompson, this is totally, and I don't mean this in a negative way towards the OVC, as a 6'7" forward that shoots 44% from three and comes off the bench. I didn't know those kinds of guys came off the bench in the OVC, and I mean that as positively as possible. What's his story, and how is he here? He's a guy that comes off the bench for this team.
I think it's someone that has found a role on this SIUE team and is filling it really well. We'll see what kind of he does on the stage on Thursday. I'm curious to see what he does, but I think these guys have fit into roles and they've excelled in these roles. And Brian Barone's done a really good job giving these guys lanes to fill.
So Brian Taylor, you mentioned, is cousins of Rayshawn Taylor. I saw the last name, and I just thought it was a common last name. I didn't think to look further than that. My own mistake there. Sometimes you see family members on the floor have like an odd connection. Is there some sort of a connection between the two like that, where they just like know where each other are at all times, or it's just so happen to be they end up the same school? What can you tell us about the Taylor cousins here?
They definitely play well together. Rayshawn was at SIUE first. Brian started his college career elsewhere, and Rayshawn enticed him to come join him in Edwardsville. And they've done really well together playing for SIUE. So they're an exciting duo.
Well, and they're both on this all Ohio Valley Conference team. They got a handful of guys on that. When you watch this team play, and I want to ask about Barone and the coaching staff and the way this team goes in a second, but is it as simple as, they got a scoring guard and they win a lot of games on his back, or is it more of kind of a shared responsibility between all of these guys? Because they got a couple other guys that are both over 10 points a game as well. What, as you watch it, do you feel like is the way you describe this team to someone as far as how they play?
They've got positional size, I would say, especially for the Ohio Valley Conference level. They've got positional size, and that works well for them. They get contributions from pretty far down their roster. A lot of guys have contributed to their success this season, and for them to have success against Houston, I think they'll need contributions from a lot of those guys on Thursday.
Well, in positional size, actually, I would think would help a team like this in this position, right? And no pun intended there, but where you're playing against a team from a Power Four conference, right? You're looking to kind of at least not get beat just when you walk off the bus, right? I look at this team and their roster and things like that, and I want to ask questions about the coaching staff, and I'll save that for the third and final segment. When they started going through the Ohio Valley Conference, though, and Rayshawn Taylor's getting his 19, 20 points per game, did you in following this team in that tournament kind of understand like, oh, this team's really going to do this right now? Or was it that big a shock when they knocked off Southeast Missouri in the final?
I would say I was surprised because they've been to the semifinals of the OVC. I think this was the third or fourth straight year. And this year they got to the title game. So that was the step. To make that another step to win it, I didn't see coming, to be honest. But like it's till that second half, and it was pretty evident with the score. They were up significantly that entire second half, and it started to sink in then that they were going to win. And yeah, it's been exciting to see this success.
I would, probably recuse myself if I didn't. But at the end of this players portion, Joe Valerie, a forward that got hurt early in the season, I think we said in the Illinois game in the pre-pod conversation, from Houston Yates High School. I don't know if I have no idea about like, does he take a medical redshirt after an injury 3 games in or whatever, or anything like that. Valerie is a Houstonian, so my audience might know more about him. It's his only year there at SIUE. He's been in a couple of junior colleges and things like that along the way. Any insight into that guy or anything like that? Do you have any, in reporting on this team, any knowledge of him, or is it because he got hurt so early is just kind of a wash?
Yeah, he broke his foot, I believe, in the Illinois game. So he just hasn't been someone talked about much as they've gone on this run in the OVC. I can't give you much insight. I would think it makes sense for him to take a medical redshirt this year, but I can't say definitively what he's going to do next.
Well, and again, I think he's an interesting name. You don't see Houston Yates in a whole lot of schools that far north. And so I had to ask because it's a unique connection, I think, between these two, besides that the Cougars. Also a unique connection here in a second. We'll talk about the head coach and the coaching staff. But before we get too far, I did mention today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. And as we get to talk about Monarch Money, if you ever checked your bank account, if you wondered, where'd all my money go? You got dining out, online shopping, entertainment. It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO to give you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Managing money with your partner can be smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Just go to Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Yes, you heard that right. At monarchmoney.com, you go to Locked On College for half off the entire first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Locked On Coogs here, Parker Ainsworth, joined by Erik Hall. Erik, this is not going to make sense to you. I always laugh at my buddy Andy Patton in that one, kind of standing there awkwardly while Isaac's talking for the majority of that ad. So I have a little chuckle to myself as that goes. But we mentioned some common ground here between coaching staffs. And earlier this week, Kelvin Sampson was asked about SIUE, and he quickly recalled that Brian Barone was son of Tony Barone, and that Kelvin, in his first few years at Oklahoma, actually coached against Tony Barone in his final few years at A&M in the 90s, and talked about how like Brian was buddies with Kellen because they'd be kind of the same age, and Kellen is now an assistant and has been assistant head coach in waiting under Kelvin at Houston and things like that. So we've heard that whole family fun story. What can you tell us about Brian Barone here at SIUE? Because truthfully, like you mentioned, like this has been a long time coming for them to make the NCAA tournament.
Well, I think the story that's gotten a lot of attention is the scissors he hung up. This is Barone's 6th year as the SIUE head coach. And when he took over the program, he put some scissors in a shadow box and hung them in the locker room, and they were saving those scissors to cut down the nets when they made the NCAA tournament, and they busted out those scissors, and they were nice and sharp and ready to go and to cut down the nets to go to the NCAA tournament when they won the OVC tournament.
So this is always in Brian Barone's vision, is what you're saying.
Yes. This has been his goal, obviously, since the day he took over as SIUE head coach. And it's an interesting situation as well. He was an assistant coach at SIUE. The coach there ahead of him, John Harris, got fired. And even though John Harris got fired, they kept on Barone as an assistant coach to become the head coach. That doesn't happen very often, and he's definitely taken advantage of the opportunity he's been given.
Well, and that kind of feels similar to in tracking his career on legitimately like Google searching. Like, obviously, you know him closer than I do. It looks like something almost the opposite that happened earlier in his career when he was at Green Bay, and he was on a staff there and thought he was going to be in line for the head coaching job there, and it didn't work out. He took a year at a community college before coming to SIUE. And so I think that kind of probably speaks to the confidence or I mean, from a coaching family, maybe there's some aspect of just understanding the business there about knowing where you're wanted. Do you feel like, obviously, like he knew it was going to happen, but do you feel like people around the program knew, like, hey, this guy's going to get us the tournament someday?
He's had a really good staff around him, and they've made progress. They've had winning seasons. This is the third consecutive winning season. So they've been knocking on the door. He made what I think is a brilliant assistant coach hire. Mike Waldo, that won more than 600 games as the Edwardsville High School head coach, like is in the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame in the state for what he did as a high school coach, has been an assistant coach and still is an assistant coach with Brian Barone on the Cougars staff. So he brought in someone super knowledgeable about the community and basketball in the area as an assistant coach, and the two of them have definitely taken SIUE to heights that they've not been to before.
Well, and so with that background, right, that he tapped in the high school area around them with the high school coach, it's interesting that, like, they do have, as I count here, what's this, 6 or 7 kids from Illinois on the roster, another couple from the Missouri and Kansas area, so, not too far away. Is it, I mentioned Joe on the team from Houston earlier. I mentioned they had a Sudanese kid that went to high school in Florida. Outside of that, does it feel like it's a lot of kids that are like a very local team, or is that just kind of an addition, right, when you bring in a high school coach?
Yeah, I think the staff there has done a good job of knowing the type of kid that will come to SIUE, because they don't have huge NIL to offer kids. They're giving them the scholarship money. For most of them, that's probably all they're getting. So they need to know the type of kids that are going to be willing to come to SIUE, and I think they've done a good job of that. And it's mostly local kids.
So Barone shows up, he hangs the scissors, he hires a high school coach, etc. You've been covering this region of the world for 12 years doing college sports. Did in your honest opinion, did you think 6 years ago, yeah, that guy is going to be the guy?
I'm not sure. I probably saw the tweet come by at that point and didn't think more of it than that Brian Barone was the SIUE new head coach. But the last couple of years, you could kind of see it. Like, I would say 2 years ago, I thought there was a chance. Rayshawn Taylor missed most of last season with an injury, but 2 years ago, it seemed like they had a chance. So, like, this seemed possible with Brian Barone, and this year's the year they broke through.
The year they broke through. Obviously, an upset in this one would be tremendous for any resume building and all of that. But he's won the conference. He's gotten the NCAA tournament. What else can Barone add to his resume? I mean, he is a coach's kid, comes from a coaching family. He's built for this in that kind of way. What more resume building does that guy got to have these days?
I think you build a consistent winner that gets the NCAA tournament consistently. I think that's what you try to do at SIUE, as long as he wants to be there.
As long as he wants to be there, and I'm not gonna, it's easy for people to want to get posts, not talking about who needs to go where, and at Houston and Kelvin Sampson and all that, people have been asking for that for a long time, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. But I do think that conversation comes up whenever someone starts winning somewhere. So where can they win elsewhere? All right, so Barone, the Cougars and the Cougars, it would not be crazy for this to be a low-scoring affair. The Houston Cougars are a low-scoring team. Do you got a score prediction for the folks at home if someone's watched SIUE a lot this year?
The betting line is around 27, 28 points.
That sounds right. Yeah, I'm trying to be nice.
I would say if SIUE can cover and keep it within 25, I'd be impressed. So let's go 80 Houston 80, SIUE 55.
There we go. We'll call it 25. You didn't even know when you said that Houston had some mark this year. They kept a bunch of teams below 60. I'm sure that there you go. You're fitting right in line with what things could look like. Well, thank you, Erik, for stopping by. Again, this is Erik of the Telegraph, covering SIUE locally. Tell us a little bit about the other Cougars in this matchup. Happy March Madness. And we always wrap up the show by saying go Cougs. And we can kind of both say that, Erik.
Yeah, go Cougs.